Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our brand new series. If you are preparing for the upcoming TGT or PGT exams, you know that the English literature syllabus is very vast and the competition is tough. I'm starting the special series where I will be covering all the writers one by one in complete details. Today, we will be reading about John Keats. Have you ever wondered how a surgeon became a poet? So, today we will read how John Keats, being a surgeon by profession, left his career and decided to become a poet. John Keats was he belonged from the second generation of romantics along with P.B. Shelley and Lord Byron. He was born in 1795 at Moorgate in London in England. His father his father was a stable keeper. Name was Thomas Keats, and his mother was Frances Keats. His father died when he was very young, at very young age, as he fell from the horse, and he was born and brought up by his grandparents. He did his schooling from John Clark School. Mentor was Charles Cowden Clark. He was orphaned at a young age. That's what I told. His mother remarried, and his headmaster was Charles Cowden Clark, who was friend and mentor of Keats. In 1815, he registered himself as a medical student at Guy's Hospital in London. And after, like in 1816, he published his first poem, that was O Solitude. And then in 1816, in October, he also published another sonnet named On First Looking into Chapman's Homer, that was dedicated to Leigh Hunt. Later on in 1816, he decided that no, that this profession is not mine, and he decided to give up surgery and wanted to become a poet. Leigh Hunt was the person who published his first sonnet, that was O Solitude, in his magazine The Examiner. And there were other poems also that were published, and Leigh Hunt helped him. And Leigh Hunt also wrote an essay, Three Young Poets, based on Keats, Shelley, and Reynolds. Now, the thing is, in 1818, they started a walking tour to Scotland and other lake districts. His brother Tom died of TB. He too himself got it genetically from his family only. And Leigh Hunt was a person, a very important person in his life, who helped him to establish himself, Keats, as a poet. Keats had attraction towards Isabella Jones later on, but and for her, or you can say she was his muse, the muse, that is Fanny Brown. Later on, she came later on, but first he had an attraction towards Isabella Jones, whom he met in May 1817, and based on her he wrote few poems. But later on he fell in love with his Frances Fanny Browne in 1818, whom he met there, and wrote poems for her like La Ballade Sans Mercy, which reflects his failure in love. He said, the famous line is, Love is my religion. I could die for that. He wrote it in a letter to Fanny Brownie, and in 1818 he caught a bad cold while nursing his brother, and he died. And then he was not well, so he went to meet his friend, and later on he died in his friend's arms itself. So the thing is, he wrote many works in between. He wrote Endymion, who he dedicated to Thomas Chatterton. Keats called Endymion a trial of my power of imagination. Now, the Endymion was like, you have heard the very famous line, a thing of beauty is joy forever. It was a narrative poem, and this poem created a lot of criticism. Like, he got a lot of criticism from lot of other people and writers. One among them was John Gibson Lockhart. He criticized him in his Blackwood magazine. This Blackwood that you can see here was a magazine where Lockhart coined the term Cockney School for Hunt, Hazlitt, and Keats. And he told him, wrote a line by saying Lockhart advised Keats that back to the shop, Mr. John, back to the plaster, pills, and ointment. That is, he meant, and he told him to go back to the hospital that he had been working on, and he commented like that and said that he is not good for writing and anything. And just told him, later on he was so much criticized that he wanted to give up writing at that point of time. So doctor, then he was not well also after all this stress, so the doctor advised Keats to move to a warmer climate, and he then moved to his friend's place. Joseph Severin was his name, in Italy. And in 1821 he died of tuberculosis in his friend's arm. The friend's name was Joseph Severin, Severn, and he was buried at a Protestant cemetery in Rome. Now his first work was on looking into Chapman's Homer in 1816. Then he wrote Endymion in 1818, which is a long narrative poem that I have already told you before. And the other poem, that Isabella the Pot of Basil, it was a very good story. It was written in Ottawa Rima. You have to remember this. This all questions are framed for the exam purpose. Isabella, the story was that there was Isabella, okay, she loved Lorenzo, who was working under, like, Isabella's brother employed a guy. His name was Lorenzo, and Isabella fell in love with Lorenzo. Now his brother would not like that, obviously, that she will marry somebody who's working under him. So they wanted their sister to get married to somebody who was very rich and had a lot of olive trees. But when his brother found out that, my sister is having an affair with Lorenzo, he kills him. And what he does, then Isabella sees a dream that and in that dream Lorenzo tells her that where her body is, and she goes and she finds his body and brings its head and plant it in a pot. The pot that you are seeing, no, she planted it there, and after that she planted some plant of basil on that, and she used to cry and weep, and instead of watering the plant, she used to water it with her tears every day. So this is basically the story of Isabella, or the Pot of Basil. And the source of this poem was Boccaccio's The Decameron. Now Lamia, this is a supernatural sort of a poetry, and a very, very interesting one, taken from Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. Lamia, she was a serpent woman, like you can see in the picture here. She's a serpent woman. What happened? This is based on a Greek myth, and it was published in the volume of Lamia Isabella, the Eve of Saint Agnes, and other poems. You can write down the name, Lamia Isabella, the Eve of Saint Agnes, and other poems. Now Lamia was a serpent woman. She fell in love with god Hermes, and god Hermes was already married to another lady. Now the myth behind this is that she had an affair with Zeus. And she bore him children. Now his actual wife, his lawfully wedded wife, comes to find out that my husband has committed an adultery with another lady, Lamia. And now what happens? She curses him, she curses her and makes her kill her own children. And after that, Lamia goes mad, and Zeus' wife was Hera that time, and she killed, and after that she cursed, and then Lamia transformed into a serpent, and she killed all other children she could find. Later on, what happens here is, we are seeing what happens after the myth and what Lamia is doing after that. So Lamia was roaming on in a forest one day, and god Hermes comes to meet her. God Hermes here is Mercury, who comes to in a search of a nymph. So the nymph he is actually in love with. Now what happens? He meets Lamia. Now Lamia does a deal with Hermes. He says, okay, fine, I will make you see the invisible nymph, but only on one condition. If you turn me back into a normal woman, then, like, she was fed up of being like a serpent, half human and half snake sort of. So later, what he agrees to that, and when she was showing him the nymph in that, she herself felt like, oh, she could see one young youth whose name was Corinth, and she went to meet Lucy. And then in Corinth, she could see, sorry, the place was named as Corinth. Over there, she could see Lucius, male, and she was attracted to him by his beauty. And then she went over there to Corinth, found him, and then they used to stay together in a palace built by Lamia. But later on, Lysias was like, no, I want to marry and I want to show the world that I have a very beautiful wife, this, that. So what he does is he tells, no, I want to, like organize a feast and conduct a marriage function. First, Lamia insisted not to do all these things. It was not necessary for them to do it. But after a lot, she agrees, but she tells that Apollonius should not be invited. Now, what happened is that he didn't invite, but Apollonius arrives on the wedding. I don't know, somehow uninvited, or he came to know, and he just comes to visit her. And then he kept on staring at Lamia because he could see what she was, not like others. He was a very pious man, he could see it clearly. And at last, Lucius was like, why is he staring Lamia continuously? What is wrong with this man? Why is he making her feel uncomfortable? He just goes and tells him at last, fool, stop staring at Lamia. And then that man says, from every ill of life I have preserved thee to this day, and I shall thee make a servant pray. Now the thing is, the man said that since birth, since young time, he has seen that child, and he was his teacher also. Now how can he leave her to be a prey of somebody like a serpent? So this is how the story ends, and Lamia then, just after her truth is out, she just vanishes into the thin air, and Lucius is very much sad and struck with agony, and I think he dies later on after this. The Eve of Saint Agnes was composed in 1819 and it was published in 1820. It was a very romantic narrative poem written in the Spenserian stanzas, based on the folk belief that the girl could see her future husband in dream if she performed some rites on the day of on the eve of Saint Agnes. And this is the basic story of the eve of Saint Agnes. The Fatal Woman. This is the most famous poem that everybody has heard about, La Bella Damson's Mercy. It is a lyrical ballad written in 1890. It deals with the hopeless passion of a knight for a fairy. Now, the fairy here is talking about is Fanny Brown, his love. He says, oh, what can ail the knight at arms, alone and palely loitering? And then the other famous line is, I see a lily on that bough. In a lot of times you have seen in rhetoric and prosody, these lines have been repeated and asked. Now the odes. He wrote a series of odes which was very famous. Ode to Psyche, Ode to Indolence, Ode to the Nightingale, that you all have read. And two others I think he wrote, Ode to the Autumn and Ode to the Grecian. So, Ode to the Psyche. Psyche was a mortal woman who was a god. Okay, now the thing is, she was goddess of soul. She joined Pantheon Lake, and the poet was like, oh, no, she had no temples of her own. So the poet gives like his mind and his brain to, and promises to build a temple in Keats' own mind. Like Keats is saying that I will build a temple for you in my own mind. I like the best temple. Keats describes a building a fae in a temple in untrodden region of mind. He uses nature imageries, thoughts, and brains, etc., to make a best temple out of her foreign words. Now the next one is Ode to Indolence. This was written in 1819. It is a 10 line stanza. Three shadowy figures were there, who visit the poets in white robes, moving like figures of a Greek vase. The three figures over there were ambition, love, and poesy. Now, initially, the poet is annoyed of these three figures because he was sleeping peacefully, and like some shadow standing in front of you, and you get disturbed, and your sleep gets disturbed. He describes how the summer days where clouds are hazy, he was seeing a dream. But now, with these shadows, he gets disturbed. He believes that the love is fleeting, ambition gives restlessness, and poetry gives no fame. And there is no way superior to the idleness of summer afternoon. So he says that summer afternoon is better compared to all these three things, that is ambition, love, and poetry. Now, Nightingale, how he has described the beauty of Nightingale in the poem is very much evident, and we all have read it. So, yeah, I'm not discussing it more because it is a very long part and it will get very long if I keep on discussing. And I think you all have read it by now. Now, Ode to a Grecian Urn is very important of all the odes that he has written. Like, heard melodies are sweet, those unheard are sweeter. They'll ask you in the question, these lines have been taken from which poetry? And then other lines will be, thou still unravish bright of quietness. These lines are very important from the point of view of TGT and PGT exams, because most of the questions, if it comes from ode, the ode, two odes they'll ask mostly is the ode on Grecian urn and ode to the Nightingale. Now the next poem, what makes him very special? See, there are a lot of poets who write about spring and have praised a lot of, like, mostly they have praised, all have praised spring. But what makes Keats more beautiful is that he is also writing and giving equal importance to autumn. He has used how autumn makes, the season of mist and mellow fruitfulness. How beautifully is describing, like, there you see how verbal images he used in this poetry, where he shows that fruits are being ripe and are waiting, the bales is full with fruits. Then he shows pictures of uh, how a lady carries that crop, and in the evening time, when every poet doesn't show the dark side of the season, always chirping, he shows the reality also of the season, where, like, after in the evening time the birds are going back, and how the crop fields are after getting harvest, before the winter, before the onset of winters. There are a lot of scenes that have been used by the poet. Here he is also accepting the cycle of life and decay. He's not only showing the positive side, but he's showing the actual side, and that too he has described it very beautifully. Now the final days in Rome. He died, as I said you, of tuberculosis in February 1825. He was buried in Protestant Cemetery, Rome, and where he died, a very famous line was written on his grave. The epitaph, that is known as epitaph: "Here lies the one whose name was written in water." This is a very, very, very important line, and you will get questions based on this line on your exams, that it was written on whose epitaph. Like, Shakespeare has a different line, he has a different line. And now Shelley called him the inheritor of unfulfilled renown, and Arnold called him that he is with Shakespeare. These were the comments made by other poets about him. So this is all for today, and if you want to see more videos related to this, or like, do you want me to go for a detailed explanation, like poet by like poems by poems, then I can do that. Otherwise, I will just proceed to the other writer, and after completing the romantic age, we will do some questions that would be important for your descriptive pattern exams. And I'll try to make some MCQ videos also after completing the romantic age. Okay, thank you. That's all for today. And if you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe.